Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we're going to be having a look at the development blog which was made for the Javelin F.A.W. Mark 9, and we're going to go through it and also talk about some things like why it exists, why did they put this in game over other stuff, and why the Javelin I think is on everybody's minds, because when you actually read this development it doesn't paint a pretty picture for the machine. First of all, the second main paragraph, they talk about where they got their information from the Javelin from, and it's basically from pilot's notes, which means the notes that are given to pilots on how to fly the aircraft from the initial, when they actually get the aircraft, so the notes that they study in order to be able to use it, and then also through other places such as IWM Duxford and places like that. So that all sounds good. The information for the Javelin should be solid in game. A lot of people do definitely talk about the issues that the Javelin has in game when it comes to its real life performance, and the main issue I have is the same issue I have with a lot of fighters. I mean, we were using 8.0 Soviet jets yesterday. I was using the Yak-30 just to try it out. Rex was in the LA-15, and the fact that if you go in a straight line in the LA-15, you rip your wings off. Same with the LA-174, same with the Sea Meteor. There is a lot of jets, when it comes to Soviets and the British, where if you try and go your max speed, you'll fall apart. And unfortunately, the Javelin is like that. It would be nice to see a fix for stuff like that, because I think it's kind of crazy. But if you actually scroll down on this and look at the history, one of the interesting things that they talk about is the Javelin was not intended as a standard fighter like the Hunter was for the British, the F-100, the MiG-19, so comparing it to them is obsolete. It was used for a different role. The role it was used for was this idea of a 24-hour defensive, jet. If anything came, the Javelin could be scrambled, it could deal with, bombers, it could deal with anything that was coming at it, which I think, is something that you need on the battlefield. But a lot of people, because of this, have questioned, why pick the Javelin over, an upgraded Hunter, or maybe some of the machines that we're going to go through. And the main reasons for the Javelin, I think, we'll go through in this video, but the fact is, it isn't the best pick, especially when it comes alongside the F-100 and the MiG-19, which were added to the game. So a lot of British players feel a bit duped about this. You give Britain a new top-tier jet, and, well, it's the worst out of the three. It's not supersonic, and it's not this, and it's not that. And you can understand why a lot of players are kind of annoyed. But in this video, I'm going to talk about why I think they added it. Because for me, from updates in December, the supersonic updates, I didn't see it as a place where we're going to just get a ton of supersonic aircraft. Obviously, the Italians came as well. But I see it as a test bed. I see it as a point where they're throwing in top-tier aircraft that they are testing now on the live server. And once those tests are, completed, then we're going to get a barrage of rank 6 aircraft in the game. That's the only way I see it. So for me, we have the F-100 and the MiG-19. These guys are testing supersonic capabilities. They're testing air-to-air ideas. They're also testing how fights go at those speeds, and also the crazy acceleration. Can everything, handle it? How is it going to work on the live server? Who's going to find the weird way of winning the match? Who's going to exploit, either the MiG-19 or the F-100? Who's going to work out how to absolutely annihilate the enemy? The Javelin is not on that scale. It is not a supersonic jet. It is not going to be able to compete with them. But from a testing point of view, the Javelin has some differences compared to those other two. And the difference is mainly the delta wing. We haven't really had a delta wing design in game. The closest that we have is kind of the Horton, but that isn't a delta wing. So the Javelin is testing out the delta wing ideas, the flight characteristics, the flight models of delta wings, and once that is nailed, my guess is we're going to see a lot more other delta wings. That's why I think stuff like the Vulcan will eventually come to the game. A lot of other jets which have that delta wing design, which is really interesting. So I don't see the Javelin as this thing that was put into the game to be, competitive at top tier, to be the one to go to. I see it as a machine that has offensive armament, that has air-to-air missiles, that has the delta wing, and that is why you use it, because it has something a little bit different to the other stuff. Now, a lot of people are seeing it from the competitive point of view, and I understand this because the majority of top-tier players only care about the competitiveness of aircraft. That is why, over the last 3 to 4 years before these supersonic jets, all we've had is people playing the Canada Air Sabre and whoever else has felt like facing them in inferior aircraft. It's why the Canada Air and the G91 were the most played when it came to jets. It's why they had the highest win rates, because guess what? People want to win. As I say many times, human element of matchmaking. It feels good when we win, so we're going to do what we can to win. And to win, we're going to play the best aircraft. Therefore, nobody is going to touch the Javelin, and it's not going to be tested. And this is the problem, because it has to be tested on the live server in order to work out the delta wing characteristics to make sure that we get them right in game so we can expand the idea so not every jet looks the same. And yeah, it's kind of as simple as that. I don't see them adding this as, okay, we're going to create a competitive 9.0 jet, because the British technically already have that in the Hunter. A lot of people will disagree with this, but the Hunter is there to be competitive. Yes, it does have its issues in the current meta, but it still can be useful. But the Javelin is there to give you something different, to try out some new ideas, to see if they can be expanded upon in the game for other machines. And a lot of people won't be happy with this because they want a competitive aircraft, but that is how it is. There's also the appeal of variation. So it will be very easy for Gaijin just to add in another version of the Hunter. Now, this is a very much modern version of the Hunter, I'll say, but there is definitely variants which would fit much more into the area that, the Javelin is. So you could add another version of the Hunter. You know what's not interesting to players? Another Hunter. Just like we found with the British, with the Challenger Mark III. It's great for balancing, having another top tier MBT for the British, but it's not that interesting. It's just another Challenger with slightly different armor. If you're trying to sell a product to somebody and you go, okay, do you want a slightly upgraded machine that you already have, or do you want a weird, wacky idea that has never been seen before in the game? Also air-to-air missiles. Also, you still keep the same guns, the 30mm, but you get a cool-looking aircraft. Because I think, for me, when it comes to aircraft like this, the Javelin, they are really nice to look at, but I'm a guy who likes stuff like the Cougar as well in the American tree. So, yeah, when it comes to a proposition of what you want to fly, a lot of people are going to go, well, I want the one which is the best. And it's like, okay, we'll go and play the F-100 MiG-90. But if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for something interesting, which isn't just going to play normally, then that's where the Javelin comes in. So I think that's why they added it. They added it because to test different ideas from what you see from other machines. And a lot of people have also said, well, if they wanted to do this, why didn't they go full wacky? Like, why didn't they add in, the Vulcan? Which is an example that comes up a lot. Well, you don't want to just throw in a bomber which can carry a ridiculous amount of bombs, and also the only thing catching it is other 10.0 aircraft when there isn't a lot of those aircraft about, and that is the big thing. Once more supersonic jets get added, once that BR gets filled out, I'm sure that we'll get some bombers such as the Vulcan. But if if you put it in now, it's going to get into a lot of 9.0 matches and nothing's going to be able to touch it. All I have to remind you of is the B-57 era, or the Canberra era, or even more recent times, the Votor era, where the Votors could not be caught. Remember, those things used to be 8.0, which was just ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, that's probably why they didn't add the Delta Wing design in with something like the Vulcan, which, we already have a user model of. Let's go through some other things they could have added, which weren't the Javelin, and why they didn't add them. I think is the best way of putting it, because a lot of people have talked about, different aircraft they could have put in, but a lot of them are not the Javelin and don't have the same characteristics. So let's go through them again. What has the Javelin got different? It's got speeds which are close to Mach 1, but as I said, the wing ripping stuff is an issue, so that needs to be dealt with. Air-to-air missiles. Still has primary offensive armament of cannons, and also has the Delta Wing design. So those are the basic three that we need for an aircraft to be different compared to the rest, and also to test the Delta Wing design, which I'm sure is something they want to do going forward. So, let's have a look. The first one is the Fairey Delta II. This is a 1950s supersonic prototype aircraft. They made two of them. Now, the problem with this one is that it goes greater than 1,300 miles per hour, so we're looking at Mach 2. That is useless to us. It also doesn't have any armament at all, so that's completely out of the picture. Beautiful machine, but has no armament. Next one is the TSR-2. This is a prototype, once again, for the British. So this, three of them was built. Now, I am using Wikipedia here just because I'm not feeling very well, so I'm just going through it as quickly as I can. So the TSR-2 was a reconnaissance aircraft bomber, no offensive armaments when it comes to cannons. All it could really carry was rockets and also nuclear stuff and bombs. So this would be on the same level as the Vulcan. No offensive armament properly, wouldn't be able to defend itself, wouldn't be able to fight. Also, it goes Mach 2. So this is out the picture as well when it comes to it. And once again, prototype, no Delta Wing. Next one, Bristol 188. This is another prototype. Three of them, no offensive armament at all. One of the most beautiful aircraft I've ever seen, but no armament. Next one, British Aerospace EAP. There was one of these made. This was actually the predecessor to the Typhoon, so this is way too fast, once again, compared to, what we already have in game. English Electric Lightning. A lot of people have asked for this one. The English Electric Lightning does make a lot of sense to add, apart from one thing once again. If we look at the English Electric Lightning and look at its general characteristics, what you find is, yes, it has the armaments. It also has an interesting design that you can see over here. It would be nice to see. It's not a Delta Wing, but it's still cool. It's different to what we've seen in the game before. It also has it has the air-to-air missiles. It could also carry some other stuff. So it's got fire streaks. It's got red tops. But it goes Mach 2. So do you see the problem here? We're starting to run into some issues with speed. A lot of British aircraft just were either less than Mach 1 or very much greater than Mach 1. There isn't really a middle ground with many of them. The next one, the Saunders ROE SR-53. This was once again another prototype interceptor made in the 50s. But the problem with this one, once again, it goes Mach 2.2, and its only armaments was some missiles. So no offensive armaments. So once you're done with the missiles, you're done. Also no Delta Wings. So this is completely out. Then you've got the Javelin itself. As I said, this has it has the Delta Wing, it has air-to-air stuff, it has offensive armaments, doesn't have the Mach 1 capabilities. There's some stories of pilots being able to reach Mach 1, but overall, let's just say generally it doesn't have Mach 1 capabilities. Last one is the de Havilland Sea Vixen. A lot of people brought this up, so I thought I would just throw it in. We have this design already in game, so therefore there is no need to test this design. It also has no proper offensive armaments apart from air-to-air missiles, and also it does not go Mach 1, it goes Mach 0.91, so pretty close, to the Javelin. But yeah, it has 6 hard points, so you can either carry rockets, missiles, and bombs. It doesn't have any offensive armaments, so that takes this one out of the criteria that we've set up. So let's talk about machines that they could have added, which weren't the Javelin, and why I think they didn't add them, instead of adding the Javelin. The ones which make more sense to me, because the stuff we've gone through here, right? So most of these are supersonic aircraft, but they're either way too fast, or they're prototypes, or, they're hardly ever used. The only ones which are really used are the Lightning and the Sea Vixen. The Sea Vixen doesn't have any offensive armaments, and the Lightning is way too fast. So those are the only two out of this list which make sense. The other ones, we've got the Scimitar. So the Scimitar makes a little bit more sense, has access to air-to-air stuff, isn't as fast, as some of the others that we've looked at, does have normal offensive armaments. The main issue with the Scimitar, though, once again, not a Delta Wing. The next one, this is the Swift. The Swift could carry air-to-air missiles. It has, the offensive armaments in the nose. Once again, not a Delta Wing. Fallen Gnat, once again, has 2 30mm, I believe, in the nose, has capabilities of carrying fire streaks, air-to-air missiles, doesn't go Mach 1, goes very, very close to Mach 1, isn't a Delta Wing. And then, of course, the Hunter, once again, isn't a Delta Wing. So I think if we're talking about a competitive point of view, especially when we talk about the Gnat and an upgraded version of the Hunter, people would have been much more happy with these machines over the Javelin. They would be properly competitive at the 10 OBR. But instead, what Gaijin, in my opinion, wanted to do was to test out a new idea. And, you can test it out as long as you want on a dev server or a test server. But at the end of the day, you're never going to know how well it does until it hits the live server. And as we've seen with the Javelin, it doesn't do too well. But the main thing is, what they're testing out is a different design. We've seen this many times, where they tested out the Horton. Look at the Horton, right? The Horton that we have in game has gone through so many different FM and DM changes. It's been insane. The differences in ripping wings has changed over the years so much. The fact that if you, went slightly negative G, it would fall apart. Remember those days? How about when it used to be able to turn on a dime? The Horton 229 as a concept in game has gone through so many iterations of them trying to get it at least somewhere historical, and I feel like the Javelin is in that state right now, and I'm completely fine with it. It's not going to be a competitive top-tier vehicle. I know a lot of you want a competitive top-tier vehicle, and that's fine, but it ain't gonna be. It's not designed to be. What it's designed to is to test an idea, and hopefully that idea comes off, so then we can add in some more stuff which is like it. As I said, the Delta Wing idea. And if it doesn't come off, if they can't get it right, then they've got a bunch of other aircraft they can fall back on. It's as simple as that. So from a adding into the game point of view, I think it's interesting. I think it's cool. And if, people weren't so bothered at top tiers about the competitive side of things, people would enjoy it a lot more. But unfortunately, at top tier they are. So this idea maybe would have been better to add a bit lower. But then again, there isn't really Delta Wings which could go lower in BR. And maybe that's another issue that we need to have a chat about at some point. But yeah, I'm happy to see it. Over the other aircraft that we've talked about, the only one I would prefer to see over this is the Gnat, and that's just because of my personal biases towards this beautiful aircraft. Everything else, it isn't as interesting to me as the Javelin is. Because the Javelin is a cool, interesting new idea, just like the Cougar was back in the day, just like the Horton was, and now, just like the Javelin is. So, yeah, simple as, really. Hopefully now you can understand why they added it to the game. So instead of, just saying, well, why didn't they add a competitive jet? Well, it's very hard to find one, for a start, for the British. And also on top of this, you got to somehow test new ideas. You got to do it. They may not always come off, but you got to try it, especially in a game that is always evolving like War Thunder. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.